Hello everybody, welcome to this webinar where we will be covering the basics of VDV. We're not going to go in much depth or full depth of all of the features, but we are going to cover how to set up a new project from start to finish. But before we get started, if you have any questions during this session, just feel free to ask a question and one of our team members will get right back to you. So today's agenda, we will do a quick background information about how this data vision works, what kind of data is supported, and so on. We'll import some data, we'll visualize the data, we'll configure alarms, we'll create users, and then we'll take a look at a couple of options how to managing the data. So after today's session, we have fully customized or installed a new project. All right, let's get just to it. So just to give you more information about how the data goes from a sensor data logger to VDV Data Vision is that on the left-hand side you have a monitoring station. This can be manually collected station or automatically collected station. Typically you would have a data logger connected to sensors. The data is then sent to a server or manually collected. As soon as it's on the server, VDV Data Vision imports the data and adds to the database, and then you have web access to the data. VDV Data Vision is being used in all kinds of different monitoring fields around the world, but what unites all of our users is that they need a reliable system, a robust system to monitor and manage all of their instrumentation data. So these are experts in different fields of instrumentation, and VDV Data Vision is being used to visualize and manage their data. So a couple of points to discuss. VDV Data Vision is inputting data from text-based data files. So they look like this. It can't be one big appended data file. It can be multiple small incremental data files being sent from FTP, for example. There needs to be some kind of a column separation. And then VDV Data Vision is scanning all of these files every minute and inputting new data. VDV Data Vision supports data from any data logger as long as it's in text-based data format, as I mentioned. And it's scanning all data 24/7, 365, every minute, inputting the data into the database. As soon as the visualization has been created, it is automatically updated every minute. And alarms are sent out if the thresholds are exceeded. We have two options. Either it can be run in-house on your own servers, or you can host project on our cloud platform. It is super scalable. So we have project where you have 2 sensors and 1 data logger, or we have project where you have 1,500 data loggers and 20,000 plus sensors. So it should fit everybody's need. VDV is then our sole product. So all day, every day we are doing improvements, we're doing bug fixes, new features, and we are doing support. So we want to deliver excellence and we get feedback from our customers all over the world, which are professionals in their field, which we take into account when we are doing improvements. But before we get started, there are a couple of glossaries. An owner is a project or a client name in the system. One VDV system can have multiple owners, and it's used to categorize data and layouts into multiple different projects. A site is then a data file that is being inputted into the database. If you have any questions after this webinar, you can look up on our help desk at help.vdvdatavision.com or send us an email to support@vdvdatavision.com. All right, let's get started. So I'm simply going to open up a web browser and I'm going to log in here into this system, and I'm an admin of this system. So I want to just quickly go over what we're seeing here. On the left-hand side, we have our menu. I'm an admin, so I can see all of the features in the system. I can here quickly minimize the menu if I need more space. And in the top right hand corner I have an alarm overview where I can confirm my alarms. I can click here my user icon to change my username, password and log out. And I have a bookmarks option where I can bookmark my most used sites in the system. I can also here click full screen if I want to view it on a full screen. So before we get started, before we import any data, we are going to create a new project. We need to create a new owner. So if I'm going to do any configuration or any changes in the system, I will find that under the setup. So I simply click setup and I can use here the filter to locate my owner. Here I have a couple of owners in my system, but I'm going to create a new owner, which is simply going to be So now we are going to set up a new project. Before we do that, we need to create a new owner. So if I'm doing any configuration or setup, I will locate the setup option in my menu. And I can use the filter to locate my owner setup. So I'm going to create a new owner and I'll find that here in the top right hand corner. I'm just going to name it webinar and I'll click save. So now I have a new owner, and when I'm doing a data import, I will choose this owner, which will own the data that I'm going to import. So next up is going to be a data import. I have an option here called data source, and here I have a couple of options. I have file location, where I'm telling the system where my data files are being stored. It can be an FTP drive or a network drive or just a local drive on the computer or server which is running with Data Vision. So here we have one location. I then create a file format. In the file format, I'm simply telling with Data Vision how my data file looks like, how my timestamp looks like, in which column my timestamp is, what kind of file ending, the delimiter, the decimal points, and so on. Then I simply go to File Import. I'm going to import one data file. I choose my format. I need to choose my owner, which is going to own this data I'm going to import. I'll just choose here my automatic weather station and I'll just give it a name. And I have option to choose here single file or incremental file. In this case, I just have one single file. I'll click next. The system will give me a preview of my data file. Everything looks good. Here I can change the alias names if I want to. And I can also select a units. I'm just going to choose here wind speed as well. I click next. Just going to give me an overview. I click save. Now in a minute or so, Data Vision will go in and import this data file. So now we can start by creating some visualization. We're going to start by creating something called a dashboard. So we have here a couple of dashboards, but I'm going to create a new one. Give it a name, simply going to call it here webinar. Again, I need to choose the owner of this webinar. Just minimize the menu here so I have more space. And I simply click here on the big plus icon to create a new box. I have here then a couple of options to choose what is supposed to be in each box. I can do a graph, I can do a table, I can do a photo, I can do a alarm overview, text box, and so on. To start with, I'm just going to do a text box. And I will increase this a little bit. I can then double click on the header to make it automatically full screen. And I'll just do something like this. Next up, I want to create a graph. I choose a graph. I choose a couple of variables. I have here my station, which we did import here a few seconds ago. And I'm just going to throw in here the battery. I give it a name. Like that. And if I want to, I can here change the scale. So I'm not using auto scale, but I might want to set it to 10 to 15. I also want to create a numeric indicator. Again, I'm just going to choose my battery. I want to have the like a numeric indicator showing the last value as well. We can do other options. We can do a compass, which is going to be our wind direction, for example. We can add a needle gauge, which you can use for any variable, but let's say I'm going to use it for my wind speed. And I'm going to set my max value to 25. And then I can also set highlights color. So from 0 to 5 might be a proper wind speed, but if it goes above 5, maybe 5 to 10, I'm going to have like a yellow one. But if it goes above 10 to 25, I'm going to have a red one. So you can have this for any variable in the system. I can also do a progress bar, I can do a tank, and so on. I'm going to add a couple of photos. I have here on my desktop a couple of pictures, just a couple of pictures that you can add. I'll click apply, I click save. So now I have created one dashboard. I can at any time here click on the dashboard and open up my dashboard. So here I have the first dashboard I created. So when viewing a dashboard, you can expand each component. You can quickly download the data from that component. And you can also click here on the ... icon to change the scale. So let's go here for 2 months. I'll go back to 1 week. And you also have the option to edit the dashboard right here. I'm going to create also a table view. I'm going to throw in here my air temperature, relative humidity, barometric pressure. And you can also edit the dashboard here from the menu. One thing to notice is that on the dashboard you can add data from any data source or station that you have in the system. So for example, if I create a new graph, I don't need to only choose data from this specific weather station. I can also here just choose a different sensors to have them plotted. So this is data from a different data logger. So it's very simple and quick to create a project overview. And for example, I can throw in here alarm overview as well. I'm going to choose a couple of different projects just so we can see something. So I click apply. So now we have a box here with all of the alarms for this specific project. And I can also add something called update overview, which will show us all of our sites and the age of all of our data. So here we have one site called AWS webinar, and the data is 2 hours and 29 minutes old. I click update. So you can have multiple dashboards, very easy to do. Everybody can do it, and you can create it in a matter of minutes. Next up in visualization aspect would be something called a real-time display. Again, I go to setup and I locate my real-time display. A real-time display is different from the dashboard, but it's where you have a picture in the background and you're placing your sensors on top. It can be just a white picture, it can be a map or a photo of the project. So before I'm going to create it, let's just take a look at a couple of examples. So here we have a real-time display of a dam. You can place all of your sensors. It will show green, yellow, and red depending on the alarm status. And here's another example, not an aerial footage, but just a picture of the dam itself. And here you can again place all of your sensors. You can add pictures to give more information about the location. But how do we create it? We go to setup and real-time display. We click a new one. And first off, we are going to create here webinar overview. Again, we choose the owner. It's going to be our 01 webinar, and we choose our picture. I have here a picture I did create before this webinar. It's just a overview map of Brussels in this case. So on the right hand side we have a couple of options. We have here general, data groups, contour, indicators, navigation, and photos. Under general you will find like general configuration for this real-time display. You can change the picture, you can change just how it looks and feels. The data groups is where you're adding your sensors. So let's start by creating one station. Just going to call it station 1. So now I've created one station. I need to add sensors to my station. So I'll just here go and add a couple of sensors. I'm going to add here a couple of extensometers. And then I can simply add my group to my real-time display. Pretty simple, but I'm going to create one more. And again, I'm going to add a couple of sensors here to my second group. You can have 2 groups, 10 groups, 50 groups, 100 groups on a real-time display. All right, now I'm going to go to general and I'm going to make some changes to how it looks and feels. First off, I'm going to change the line padding, which will say like how much padding is in the data table. All right. I am going to increase my station name, and I'm going to change the font color and the background color to a light blue, something like this. I can also increase my main font size, and I can decide I want to keep my timestamp a little bit smaller. I click back. So now I have one real-time display here with 2 data groups. Under photos is what you would expect. You can simply choose a photo. I'm going to here just choose one photo. You can choose if you want to have a small or large icon, and it can be placed here in you can choose where you want to have it, and at any time you can use the XY coordinates to move it around to be in the right location. So 0.0 is the top left hand corner, and then it's just in pixels, the location of each item. I can throw in a different photo. And I will throw that in here. I'll click back. I'll click close, and now when I've done this, it's automatically saved. I will go simply here to Webinar Overview. I have here my 2 stations. I can click on any value to take a look at what has been going on for the past couple of days. I can click here on my picture to take a look at it. But let's do something more. I'm going to go back to real-time display. I will edit my webinar overview. I'm going to display here alarm status. That means that if I have alarm configured for these sensors, it will change colors depending on the alarm status. It'll go from green, yellow, and red. If I have multiple data groups on my real-time display, it can be of interest to display them as a box with a pop-up information. I will just increase the size of the box. It means that I will just display a box, and the box will have the color of the highest alarm. So here I have 3 green alarms, so no alarms, and 1 yellow. That means that the box here will be yellow. So if you have 50 data groups, it could be of interest to display it like this. Under indicators, you can add multiple indicators. You can have here alarm table. You can do a numeric indicator. You can do a text box. A text box could be just general information or content information about this project. So I'm going to go back and close, and I'm going to create a new real-time display. I'm going to create a new one just called South Area, and I have here a different real-time display or picture that I did. I need to select the owner. And this is just going to be a more zoomed in picture. So first we did an overview, then we're going to do 2 more zoomed in real-time display with more information, and then we are going to link them all together. So here again, we can throw in more information. We can have multiple, have here more data groups. So I'm going to throw in here just 1 station over there. And I'm going to add here just a 2nd station as well. I'm going to throw that in there. I'm going to do an indicator, and I'm just going to throw in a graph. And I'm going to throw in here my battery voltage, just an example. Increase the width a little bit. So I have here my graph as well. I'm going to select here, not 2 days, but let's say last 6 days. So this real-time display can include much more details than our overview. We can add here numeric indicators, multiple boxes, and so on. We'll go again to general and just change here the line padding real quickly and the names, and I click close. Now I want to do a navigation where I'm going from this real-time display to our overview. So click navigation, I simply click new, and I just choose my webinar overview. So you can have multiple layers of real-time display. So I'm just going to add it here back to overview. Now I need to edit my webinar overview and add a link to our more closed up real-time display. So I'll go create a new navigation. I'm going to choose my here South Area. And I'll just add a link here. So you can have multiple links, multiple real-time displays. So if I open up here my webinar overview, again, I can see here my pictures, I can see here my alarm status, but now I can click here South Area. Now I have a different real-time displays with more detailed information about this area specifically, and I have a link here back to our overview. You can also see that the overview button is yellow because I have a yellow alarm, which is a high and low alarm, on the other real-time display. So if I would have a red alarm, which is a critical alarm, this button will actually be red. All right, excellent. So now we have created this real-time display. What we can do, if we go back to our dashboard setup, is that we can also add this real-time display to our dashboard. I'm going to choose here my webinar overview. So here I have my dashboard. I'll click update. And if I open up my webinar dashboard, I have here all of the information as before. But at the bottom, we also have our real-time display. I have the same functionality. I can click on any value. I can click here to the south area to go into more details. So same functionality, but you're just combining it all into one big dashboard. Super simple, and everybody can do it. All right, next option with the visualization would be the GIS. The GIS, we have covered that in specific or in other webinar, but I'm just going to quickly show that here. I have here one GIS map. I can click edit. I can click here markers, and you can add markers. It can be just a variable, which is just a graph. You can add a dashboard, displacement graph, real-time display, webcam, and so on. I'm just going to throw in a real-time display, and I'm just going to select my webinar overview. I can choose my icon, and I can point to the GIS where I want it to be located. I can also here add my dashboard, which is going to be my webinar dashboard, and I can throw that in there as well. So super simple to add this to a GIS map as well. So if I take a look at my GIS map, I have here my webinar dashboard, same functionality as before. You can also here link it directly to the real-time display. All right, so this was the end of the visualization aspects fairly quickly. Next, we are going to take a look at alarms and contacts. So before sending out any alarms from the system, we need to create a contact. So there can be multiple contacts in the system. And each contact can have multiple email addresses just by separated by a comma. Again, I choose the owner. I can choose to type in the company and click save. So you can have here 10 contacts, 20 contacts, 100 contacts. All right, just here 2 contacts. When we have the contacts, we need to create a contact group. Again, you can have multiple contact groups, and in each group you can have one or more contacts. So here I have one contact group called maintenance. I can also create a new one which could be called admins. Again, I need to choose the owner. And then for each group, you can simply click here the user icon and add people to the group. You can have the same users in multiple groups, and these are the people that will receive alarms and report when we are configuring the alarms and the reports. All right, let's take a look at the alarms. Again, we're doing a change in the system, so we go to setup, and here up top we have 3 alarms. We have something called just alarm, custom alarm, bulk alarm. Let's quickly go to the alarm. Here is a list of all of our sites in the system. Just click here, edit, and it'll give us a list of all of our sensors. So if I want to monitor the battery, I simply check the monitor. I will type in here 11 and 11.5 as my low, and low alarms. So if it goes below 11.5, I will receive alarm, and if it goes up below 11, I will also receive alarm. Delay means if I'm getting a frequently one bad reading, which I don't want to receive alarm for, I can say a delay of 60 minutes or any other value. So the alarm needs to be active for at least, in this case, 2 hours before it is actually triggered. And if it's a critical alarm, I can have the system send me a repeated email or text message every 15 minutes until I actually confirm it. And at the bottom, we need to choose our contact groups. So I'm going to choose here my maintenance contact group. And you can in the system send, for example, the low and high warnings to a maintenance group, which is just going to be my maintenance. And my client group is going to be my admins. So the admins are not going to receive the warnings, which is just going to be the low and high warnings, but they are going to receive the critical ones, which is going to be the low, and the high. So it is so everybody don't need to receive all of the alarms. For each sensor, you can also throw in a custom text message. So if this goes to a low, go on site and change the battery. So somebody is going to receive this, they will give me a call, and then they will go on site and change the battery. So you can include that for any sensor. And at the bottom, you can also choose attachment. So I want to include a graph and a data file for the last 12 hours leading up to the alarm. So the people receiving the alarm don't need to log in to take a look at what has been going on. They will actually be sent the data and the graph to their inbox. I'll just click Save. If you're not using in this case, we're not using the upper limits, we'll just type in a value that is just out our reach, because we're just interested in using the low, and low values for our battery. So now every time a data is inputted into the database, so the system is scanning every minute, it will check the battery voltage for these alarms and send me an email or text message if the values are value exceeded the threshold. The next up is the custom alarm. The custom alarm is where you're doing more calculation of the data, but not just the latest value. So I can go here to, for example, I will take my rain from my weather station, and if the summary for the last 12 hours is above 5, then alarm is triggered. So we're not just taking a look at the last value, but we're actually taking a look at a summary or an average or a rate of change for over a specific time period. And if it's above or below a specific constant, an alarm is triggered. So the system is scanning every time data is inputting, taking a look at the last 12 hours, in this case, checking for the alarm threshold, and then sending out alarm. You have here the same option as before. We can send this to the maintenance group. You have here repeat and delay, same as before. The last option, called bulk alarm, is that we had a lot of our users where you have 100 stations for example, and you want to do alarm on multiple sensors at a time that all have the same limits. Okay, it could be time consuming to go into each site and set the alarm limit. So you can here create a new bulk alarm. You can easily create multiple alarm limits. So here, for example, we have 3 alarm limits for our battery, and then you can simply choose a sensor from multiple stations and add them all into one bulk alarm. So you can add, in this case, we're adding our battery voltage for all of our stations, and then these 5 battery voltages will be checked for these 3 alarm limits. So this is just to make it easier to manage multiple sensors that you're checking for multiple alarms. Excellent. The last alarm is simply something called data update alarm. So for all of the sites or data files that are being inputted into the system, you can tell the system to notify you if data is not being inputted. So, for example, here we have our webinar site. I will just click here, edit. I will activate the monitor. I will say if no data is inputted for 5 hours, I want to send an email to my maintenance group. I'll just click confirm. So now the system is checking each time is new data been inputted. If it has not been inputted for the last 5 hours, I will send out a notification to the maintenance group. You can then use the filter to filter out the site that you're looking for. And you can also use here the ... icon, and you can actually set the monitor, the alarm for multiple stations at a time. So I'm going to set this for 7 hours. I'm going to choose my maintenance. I'll click update and I click confirm. So it will change the alarm, alarm configuration for all of these sites that I have filtered out. In our menu, we then have something called Update Overview. So it will show us a list of all of our sites that we are inputting, and it will show the age of our data. We will then have either a green, red, or a white background. A green means that we have configured a data update alarm and it is not active. A red means that we have configured a data update alarm and the alarm is active. So we actually have alarm here for this specific station. White background color means that we have not configured the data update alarm and we should configure the data update alarm. In the update overview, we have here the ... button as well. And here we can, as before, we can quickly filter out a specific station, or we can only show active sites with active alarms and so on. Next up is going to be calculation of data. We call it virtual variable. Virtual variable is where you're doing calculation on the raw data from the data logger. A virtual variable can be used as any other variable in the system. You can configure it for alarm, add it to a real-time display, dashboard, GIS, reports, and so on. I'm just going to add it here, one alarm, one virtual variable. So you give it a name, and here you have your equation. You can do multiple complex mathematical functions of the data, and you can have data or sensors from different data loggers in the same equation. So typically you're doing a calibration or a offset of the data. We have then a couple of options here. We can click calculation example just to be sure that our calculation is correct. The datum can be used to choose our baseline reading. So if I choose a specific timestamp, I can actually, instead of typing this value in here, which is going to be my baseline reading, I just can type in here a datum, which is just going to grab my datum reading. If it's a complex calculation, I can do constants. So I could actually take this here, create a new constant. I'm just going to type it here as a B. And then instead of typing in the value, you can just have the constant here in the equation. You can also do a rate of change. So if I activate it, in this case, it will actually take current reading and do the difference between current reading and the reading 24 hours ago and plot that. So you would see the change in value for the last 24 hours. Recently, we added an option called time variable. So if I activate that, I will actually get a date box here. And this is where you're doing, if you need to do a multiple calculations on the data, if you are doing a new calibration of the sensor. So let's say this equation is valid from February 1st, 2018. Then I go on site, I need to recalibrate it. I'll just click here now, the plus button at the bottom. I'll do a small offset here. And this equation is valid from 7th of October 2019. So now when the data is being plotted, this equation here in the beginning is used for data from 2018. And then this equation is being used of all data after 7th of October 2019. As I mentioned before, the virtual variable can be included in any visualization in Vista Data Vision. All right, now we have created visualization, we have configured alarms, we have created virtual variable. Next up is to create a user. So again, we go to setup and simply click user. Here we have a couple of users, but we are going to create a new one. So I'm just going to create a new user. I'm going to call it here 01 webinar. I'm going to give it a full name, just a webinar. Password is going to be 1234. The default page means what will the user see when they log in. So I'm going to choose dashboard. I want them to see the dashboard when they log in. I can have the user expire. So if it is just a temporary user, I can say they can only log in until 1st of November, for example. But I'm going to skip that. And then you give them access to the owner. So I'm going to choose here 01 webinar. Next, we have two options here under features and setup. So you can choose what features this specific user has access to. I'm going to give them access to here the dashboard, a real-time display, alarm overview, a bookmarks, and I'm going to give them access to documents and notes. I'm going to cover documents and notes here in a few minutes. I'm going to give them access to update overview as well. I'm not going to give them access to any configuration, but everything is controlled through the user access. So if you want them to have able to do alarm setup, for example, you simply activate that. Now we see here at the bottom, we have sites, dashboards, real-time display. I'm just going to choose all sites, all dashboards, and all real-time displays. That means they will have access to all sites, dashboard, and real-time displays that are available and will be created on a later stage. If I just want to give them access to this webinar overview, I can just choose that, and that means that they will not have access to any new real-time displays that will be created for this specific owner. All right, I'm going to click here save. I now have created this specific new user. I'm going to open up a new browser. So I'm typing in here our username and our password. When I log in, I'm logging directly into our dashboard, our webinar dashboard. You can see the menu is much simpler than before. We have here access to alarm overview. We have here access to our dashboard. We just have one dashboard. We have access here to download data and real-time display. So this specific user will just see data that belongs to this webinar owner. But if this user would then have a different project coming up, I could edit simply that user and I can quickly give them access to new projects. So if I would give them access here to demo water and demo geo, for example, you can see the sites. We have more sites available, we have more dashboards and more real-time displays. If you're creating multiple users and they all have similar access, you can create something called user role. A user role is like a template. So I'm just going to here, just a client template. I give them access to dashboard. I give them access to bookmarks, alarm overview, real-time display, just view documents, and no setup, and I click save. So when I'm going to create a new user, instead of needing to remember to check all of the boxes, I have here something called a user role client template. Everything is then grayed out, and it is predefined that I have this specific user's access to the dashboard, real-time displays, alarm overview, and so on. So it's very simple to do a template for different user privileges. All right, so we have now created the dashboard, GIS, real-time displays, done contact groups, virtual variables, and when we have actually created a user that we can send to the client or to the staff member that they can log in and view the data. So now we're going to take a look at a couple of smaller but very important features that can be useful. First off is the reports. This is a new feature that we released a couple of weeks ago. It's similar to the dashboard, but you can create multiple reports and you can add your graphs as you have created them in the dashboard, for example. So here we have a text box, we have a couple of graphs, and we can here add, just for example, we can add a graph here at the bottom. I'm going to choose one specific graph, and we can throw that in. So you can also add a text box, a heading, graph, and a table. This is something that we are going to build on to adding more components to this report feature. Then the report can be sent. So I'm going to choose the owner. I will simply choose our admin contact group, and I will activate the schedule. I want to send this monthly. I'm going to send it out at 8 a.m. first of each month. I will click save. So now I have this report. It's going to be generated automatically first of each month, going to be sent to my admin contact group. Again, if we want to have more people in our admin group, we'll just create them as contacts, add them to the group, and then more people will receive this report. I can also download it here on the fly. I can choose a custom time period, so 1st of October until today. The graphs are automatically updated, and I can click download. The system will now create our PDF report. It can take a few seconds depending on the size of the report and the time period, but now I have here my PDF report. So this is how the report will look like when it's being sent as an email attachment. All right, next item is something called a webcam. You can have webcam in the system, either one webcam, 5 webcams, 100 webcams. In this case, a webcam is being sent, or image is being sent with an FTP to the server, and Visit Data Vision is grabbing the picture and inputting into the database. So you have access to all historical pictures, and you can add the webcam to a dashboard. You can add it to a GIS as well. You can also choose here, you just want to see pictures between 10 a.m. and noon. So we'll just see like 1-2 pictures every day. And you can even do a slideshow. So you're playing all of your pictures over a specific time period. So it's a very simple way to get like a visual confirmation from the site. Next up would be the notes. The notes are a very powerful tool where you're creating a maintenance or information about the project. So we simply click here plus to create a new note. We connect it to a specific site, and we can choose to connect it to a specific sensor or just the site in general. So for example, if we are changing the battery, we can actually connect it to the battery. But you choose the type. It's just going to be a maintenance note. It is going here to be today. Annual checkup, went on site and checked the station, all good. You can even then upload a picture of your visit and you'll click save. So now the picture and the text is saved to the notes, and when you're looking at the notes in the later on, you will always be able to finding all of your notes. You can even do a filter, so if you want to locate one specific note from either specific project or specific site, you can do that. Under documents, users have the options to upload documents to the system. You can create multiple folders. For example, it could be manuals, calibration sheets, reports, and so on. And then you can upload a PDF, Excel file, picture, Word, and so on. So it is as you would expect. You can click here, the brochure, and I'm simply going to click add. It will give you an option here to choose a folder, and I'm just going to choose a picture, a site picture. I will click save. So now I have this photo here. I can grab the picture on a later stage when I want to. So this is a great option to have all of your documents in one place, give easy access to the document. The client and the staff members can easily grab the latest reports and so on. One thing I want to point out with the notes and the documents, if you're going to user setup, both under documents and notes, you have 4 options. You have no access, view, edit, and admin. No access means you don't have access to the documents. View means you can only view documents that you have access to. Edit means that you can upload new documents. You can delete your own documents, but you cannot delete like no other documents. Admin means that you can create new document, you can delete your own documents and any other document. That's same for the notes. Excellent. Next up would be the download data. So download data is a super powerful tool to download data from the system. So again, we can just choose here a couple of our sensors with just double clicking them. And here we have our sensors. I can click download. And as you would expect, the data is just downloaded to my computer. I have here my timestamp and each sensor in different column. I can even download data from a different locations, and these sensors here, the extensometers, are actually virtual variables. So I'm not only just downloading the raw data, I'm also downloading the virtual variables. And we can here go, if we want to download the data since January 1st, for example, we can simply click download. It takes only here about a second. I have the data file ready, and here I have both the calculated data and the automatic weather station data since January 1st. But we don't need to only to download the raw data. We can actually change it to something called a summary. And in the summary option, you have options to do hourly, daily, monthly, and yearly. So let's do a monthly summary. Then for each sensor, we can choose if we want to do a monthly average, maximum, minimum, and summary. So for example, for the rain, I'm going to do a summary for the month. For the battery, I want to do the average. For the wind speed, I want to get here the maximum and the average. So you can fully customize this. You can even do, I want to get the average, maximum, minimum for one specific sensor. I'm going to remove here a couple of extensometers. Just going to click save here. And again, I'm just going to choose here my summary for my rain. I want to do my average for my battery, but the wind speed, I want to get the maximum as well. So let's click download. I will get a data file with 1 line per month and actually get my average, maximum, minimum summary. So the system is calculating the average battery voltage, for example, for the whole month of April here, for example. So we don't need to just download the raw data. We can have VDV Data Vision do this calculation for us. So let's say you're doing this on a monthly basis just to take a look at the data, doing some summary, but you don't want to do this manually each time. So we can then just click Save here. And I'm just going to save it as a monthly template. Next time when we come in here to do our download, we just click here, Load, and I have here my monthly template. Everything is pre-selected. I have here all of my sensors that I have chosen. I have here also the options that I have checked. So super simple to do this quickly, first of each month to do a summary report of all of the sensors. All right, next option would be something called manual input. A manual input is you need to decide which sites to allow manual input. Here I just have one site that I allow manual input. And the manual input is, you can do multiple different things. Either you can just delete specific reading from the database, or you can modify specific values. You can either type in here NaN, or you can just change the actual value. You can also simply add a new reading. So you can choose here, this is September, something like this, and you can type in the values for each sensor, click Save, and that will be stored in the database. So if you're doing some manually collection of data, the data can be automatically or like manually entered through the web interface. So this is very useful to do a small correction of the data, to remove bad readings or to add new readings. Excellent. Similar way to modify data is something called validation. Again, I'm going to Setup and Validation. I have here all of my sites. I will open up our webinar station. Here, the validation is a process that will run automatically. So if I activate here, for example, my air temperature, if my air temperature will ever go below 6,000 or above 6,000, I have a couple of options. Either I can just take the last legal value, I can do a linear interpolation between the previous good point and the next good point, or I can replace it with a null. Under here, min and max, it will show us the minimum and maximum value in the database, but sometimes a sensor returns like a error number that we want to remove from the system, and then this would be a great way to do that. One thing to notice is the gap size. Gap size means if we change this to 4, so if we get 4 or less readings that are outside our limits, it will be validated, but if we get 5 or more, it will not be validated. So the reason is we don't want to validate if we get just constantly bad data. We don't want to automatically validate it. So we just want to have some fail-safe. So if we get 1, 2, 3, 4 readings, okay, it will be validated. But if we get more, it will not be validated. So all of our graphs will indicate that, and we can take a closer look why our sensor is constantly sending bad data. Very good. Next up would be something called a localization. So localization means is that you can modify how the data is presented in the system. So you can just quickly tell the system how you want to have your date format. If you want to do 24 hours or 12 hours, if you want to do a CSV or TXT file, if you're doing a ladder size or A4, how your delimiter and decimal point is. You can have multiple localization if needed, and each user can have a different localization. Very good. There are about 2 items left that I want to cover here. One is a login page. So here we have our default login page, but you can have multiple login pages to the system, either for different project, different client, or different departments, for example. So I'm just going to create a new one. I'm going to choose a new background picture. I'm going to choose this nice picture here from Iceland. I give it a name, webinar. I can see the file name is index_webinar.html. I can add here a description that will appear below the login form, and I can change how I want to keep the username and password to appear. So if I click save, I can see now I have 2 login pages. So if I actually open up demo.vdvcloud.com, I will type in index. I can see here I have a different login page or a new login page, but I'm actually going into the same system. So here I could type in 01 webinar, the user that we did before. I click enter, and now the user is the same user as before, and they see the same data as before. So I'm going to log in here quickly again as my admin. The last thing I want to cover here in this basic webinar is the store. So for the administrator of each system, they will have an option to see the store, or they will see the store. The store is the place where we are publishing new features, either bug fixes or simply new features. The icon will change green if we have new components available, and here we have 4 components that we can install. So for example, we need to update our virtual variable. It will give us information about what's new in this release. So we have here option to export and import virtual variable from the web interface. I'll just click update. I will need to type in my administrator password, and the system will now automatically download the latest patches from our servers and apply it to the system. So we are doing releases every few weeks, so all of our users have a system that is constantly being updated. Excellent. Before we do a quick summary, I want to point out the bookmarks, which are very interesting or very useful. Is that if we open up our dashboard, for example, we can do a bookmark. So I want to bookmark my webinar dashboard. I'll add that here to the list. I can also bookmark, for example, a contact setup. So when I'm doing anything here in the system, instead of needing to go to setup and contact, I here can quickly click my bookmark. I can click contact, so I'm automatically taken to that page. I can go to my webinar dashboard. So here you can do multiple bookmarks with the pages or features that you're using mostly, just to save you a couple of steps with the mouse. All right, let's do a quick summary. There are a few options here that we do for our customers. So we provide the whole package for our customers. As I mentioned, it can be installed locally, it can be used on our cloud platform. We do on-site installation if needed, so we will travel on-site, do a on-site installation and training, so we go in full depth of all of the aspects or features in Vista Data Vision. We do then ongoing support through email, Skype, phone. We do remote support where we will remote log into the servers, and then we also do custom development. So if any of you are doing something that takes a lot of time or just some time, a manual task, we often do a work with our clients where we want to minimize the time needed to work on the data. It can be specific graphs or specific reports that can reduce the time needed to work with the data. So a quick summary or wrap up. So this was just a quick introduction to Vista Data Vision. We did not go into super depth of any of them. If there are any feature that you want to go into more detail, send us an email to our support team. We can either schedule a one-on-one session to go over specific features, or we can also have a similar webinar for you and your team where it's more focused on your needs, where we are doing a training. We will look at the system, how we have set it up today, and give you a recommendation of what can be improved. So, and for those that are not using Vista Data Vision yet, we do offer 2-week free trial on our cloud platform. So send us an email to support@vistadatavision.com and we will have that set up quickly for you. And finally here, please follow us on LinkedIn. There we are publishing both articles, new updates and webinars and so on. And then we are releasing videos to our YouTube page. So thanks for taking the time today to learn more about Vista Data Vision. Hopefully it was beneficial for you. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we want the system to be easy to use. Anybody can use it. It will save you time. If you know how to use a mouse, you know how to use Vista Data Vision, but yet it's very powerful and reliable. So thank you and have a great day.